I kept my smile steady while she poured herself a second glass of Pinot and leaned closer to her. Parents, whispering in French like the rest of us were furniture. His dad is pathetic, she murmured, voice sweet as sugar. But the son is perfect. I'll marry him, get the green card, and leave with the inheritance. The three of them chuckled quietly, confident in the privacy of their language. I let the laughter hang in the air. I buttered the rolls. I asked if they wanted more gravy. Then, when I stood to clear the plates, I looked her straight in the eyes and answered calmly, fluently, in perfect French. It was a pleasure meeting you. I'm sure immigration will feel the same. And that's when her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I didn't flinch when she insulted me because flinching would have warned her. My name is Richard Hale, 62, widower, retired firefighter who still wakes up at 4:30 like an alarm lives in my bones. My son, Ethan, is 34 and steady in the way good men get when they've had to be their own backbone early. He came to Sunday dinner in early October with a woman I'd never met and a look on his face I hadn't seen since he was 8 and brought home a stray dog. Dad, he said, this is Juliette Moreau. She was petite, elegant, and practiced like she'd been trained by someone who measured charm in millimeters. Her English was polished, with a French accent that landed exactly where Americans liked it. Mr. Hale, she said warmly, taking both my hands. Ethan talks about you with such respect. I'm honored. I believed her. I wanted to. I had spent years telling myself I wouldn't be the skeptical father who found fault in every woman my son loved. Grief makes you cling to the idea that something in your family can still go right. At the table, Juliet laughed at my old station stories, complimented my brisket, helped clear plates without being asked. Ethan beamed like he'd finally solved life. And I told myself, good. Let this be good. But even then, something in me stayed awake, like a smoke detector with fresh batteries, waiting for the first hint of heat. The moment Ethan stepped out of the room, Juliet's mask loosened. After dessert, Ethan excused himself to take a call from his project manager. He works commercial construction, big job sites, deadlines, the kind of stress that makes you check your phone before you check your pulse. I loaded the dishwasher. The kitchen light hummed softly. The house smelled like coffee and rosemary. Juliet's phone rang in the living room. She answered in French, quick and casual, as if no one in Texas could possibly understand. Here's what she didn't know. I spent a year in Montreal in my 20s on an exchange program, and stayed another year because I fell in love with the city and the language. My French was rusty. But rust doesn't erase steel. I heard her laugh, low and satisfied. He's so easy, she said in French. Ethan thinks I'm some romantic story. He's desperate to be the good man who saves me. Then, the sentence that made my hand tighten around a dinner plate. His father is an old bull. Ugly. Soft. He'll hand us whatever we need once we're married. My breath caught. I stayed still, like my body didn't want to make a sound that would prove I was listening. Juliet continued, voice bright. Yes, the house is worth a lot. He mentioned his late wife, there's probably insurance, and the father has retirement accounts. Americans are sentimental. It will be easy. Pause. The green card is the point. The wedding is the key. 2 years maximum, and then I leave. My fingers slipped. The plate clattered against the counter loud enough to make me curse under my breath. Juliet appeared in the doorway instantly, face full of concern. Mr. Hale, are you okay? Her English was perfect. Her compassion was a costume. I swallowed hard. Just clumsy. She stepped closer, offering help like she hadn't just described my family like a grocery list. Let me, she said softly. You shouldn't be cleaning. You cooked such a wonderful meal. She smiled, and I realized I wasn't meeting my son's fiancée. I was meeting a professional. I didn't tell Ethan because love makes smart men defend the wrong person. That night, after they left, I sat at my kitchen table under the yellow light and listened to the refrigerator cycle on and off like a metronome. I had 2 options. Tell Ethan immediately and watch him reject the truth because it came from me. Or play the long game and risk him getting hurt while I gathered proof. I hated myself for even considering the second option. But I'd seen men in burning buildings do irrational things because they couldn't accept what was happening. Ethan was in his own fire. If I accused Juliet with nothing but overheard words, she'd cry. She'd twist it into a story about the controlling father who hated foreigners. Ethan would pick her, because that's what love does when it feels threatened. So I made a decision that felt like swallowing broken glass. I would act normal. I would let Juliet think she was winning, and I would learn exactly who she was. Before bed, I opened a dusty lockbox in my closet. Inside were documents I hadn't touched since my wife Marlene passed: insurance papers, deeds, old statements. Marlene used to call them our boring treasure. The house in Cedar Park wasn't flashy, but it was valuable. The kind of asset that makes people lean in closer when they hear numbers. I stared at my own signature on legal forms and felt something new harden in my chest. If Juliet thought I was soft, she'd learn the difference between kindness and weakness. And if you're listening right now, I want you to remember this. The quiet ones aren't always harmless. Her online life looked like a showroom, beautiful, clean, and empty. The next morning I did what every modern parent does when fear gets practical. I searched. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Juliet's pages were flawless. Photos in Paris cafes, sunlight on her hair, a few artsy shots of croissants and museums, nothing too specific, nothing too traceable. What there wasn't? History. No childhood friends tagging her in old pictures. No messy family comments. No decade-long trail of real life. Her LinkedIn claimed hospitality management in France, but the company names were vague. No coworkers, no recommendations, no fingerprints. People who've lived real careers leave behind crumbs. She'd left a polished plate. I dug deeper, cross-checking names, reverse image searching a couple photos. One picture, Juliet in a red coat by a river, came up on a travel blog that wasn't hers. Same coat, same pose, same angle. Like she'd copied someone's life, the way people copy recipes. My phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Morning, Dad," he said, upbeat. "Juliet couldn't stop talking about you. She said you were impressive." My jaw tightened. "That's kind of her." "We're thinking about getting engaged," he added, voice dropping like it was sacred. "Soon." My throat went dry. "Soon as in Christmas, maybe, or earlier. When you know, you know." I forced warmth into my voice. "That's wonderful, son." While he described ring ideas, I stared at Juliet's empty social media like it could blink back. Christmas was closer than people realize when you're counting in days instead of decorations. And I suddenly understood. I wasn't just protecting Ethan from a heartbreak. I was racing a timeline built by someone who treated human lives like a schedule. The moment a scammer senses doubt, they speed up the romance. 2 days later, Ethan invited me to lunch. We met at a barbecue place off 183, the kind with butcher paper on the tables and sweet tea that could glue your teeth together. Ethan looked tired but happy. That's the most dangerous combination. When a man is exhausted, he clings harder to whatever feels like peace. "She wants her parents to visit," he said. "Next week. She says they're traditional. They want to meet the family before we announce anything." "Traditional," I repeated. "Careful." Ethan nodded. "They're flying in from France. Isn't that great?" I took a slow sip of tea and tried not to picture 3 strangers rehearsing lies. "Have you met them on video?" I asked. "Once," he said. "They were sweet. Her dad's a retired teacher. Her mom works in local government." Something about the details felt too perfect, too tidy, like a backstory designed to calm suspicion. I kept my voice neutral. "That's a big trip. You're sure everything's organized?" Ethan laughed. "Dad, she's not shady. She's just different. Sophisticated. Different. Sophisticated." Those were the words men used when they couldn't articulate why they were ignoring their instincts. I nodded, pretending to be the supportive father. Inside, I was running scenarios. If her parents showed up, and I asked one wrong question, Juliet would know I wasn't the easy target she'd planned on. And that meant I needed help, someone who could verify truth without tipping my hand. That afternoon, I called my niece, Natalie, who worked in immigration law. When she answered, I said, "I need to ask you something, hypothetically." She sighed like she already knew my life was about to get complicated. Natalie didn't gasp. She pulled up a checklist like she'd seen this movie 100 times. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Round Rock. Natalie arrived with her laptop and the sharp, no-nonsense look of someone who reads lies for a living. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The French phone call, the timeline, the money talk, the way Juliet performed kindness like it was a job. Natalie listened, elbows on the table, eyes steady. When I finished, she flipped her screen toward me. "This is a general list," she said. "Public, not classified. Indicators of marriage fraud." I scanned the bullets and felt my stomach drop. Rust relationship. Limited verifiable background. Financial motivation. Isolation of the U.S. partner from family. Overly polished narrative. Multiple identities or inconsistent history. How many boxes does she tick? Natalie asked quietly. Too many. Natalie nodded. Knowing is not the same as proving. People like this study American men. They tailor their story to the target. Target, I echoed. She didn't correct me. If you confront her without evidence, she'll flip it, Natalie warned. She'll cry. She'll say you're racist, controlling, paranoid, and your son will defend her because defending her will feel like defending himself. I stared at my hands. They looked older lately. What do I do? I asked. Natalie hesitated, then said, Legally? Tell Ethan to slow down. Insist on meeting her family in France before any wedding. And realistically? Natalie's gaze sharpened. Gather evidence, quietly. Document everything. Like a case. Exactly like a case. I left that coffee shop with two things, fear and clarity. Because if Juliet was a professional, she didn't just want Ethan. She wanted our whole family to become her next chapter. And I wasn't going to hand her the pen. I hired a man who looked boring because the best investigators always do. His name was Marcus Reed. He showed up at my house in a plain button-down, carrying a slim folder, like someone who'd come to talk about landscaping. He sat at my kitchen table and glanced around with calm, assessing eyes. You're worried about your son, he said. Yes. And the woman. Yes. Marcus nodded. People in your position usually want to feel like they're not doing anything extreme, but hiring me is extreme, so we need to be smart. I swallowed. Can you verify her background? I can verify what exists, he corrected gently. And I can tell you what doesn't. I gave him her name, her claimed hometown, her supposed employment. Marcus asked for photos, social links, and one detail that surprised me. Where did they meet? Coffee shop, I said. Downtown Austin. Marcus's mouth tightened slightly. Of course. Over the next week, he worked quietly. No dramatic stakeouts. No trench coats. Just databases, public records, and the kind of pattern recognition that makes liars sweat when they don't know why. When he came back, he didn't sit down right away. He stood by my counter and said, Richard, her story has holes big enough to walk through. My chest clenched. How bad? Marcus opened his folder and slid out documents like he was dealing cards. She entered the U.S. 8 months ago on a tourist visa. The address she listed, a short-term rental she left after 6 weeks. So she came here looking, I whispered. Marcus nodded. Then he said something that chilled me. And I don't think Ethan is her first attempt. The worst part wasn't that she lied, it was how many times she'd done it before. Marcus placed 2 photos on the table. In one, Juliet stood beside a man outside a courthouse in Nevada. In the other, she wore white beside a different man in a small-town newspaper wedding announcement, different name, same face. 2 previous marriages, Marcus said. Both ended fast. Both ended with settlements. Both men took financial hits. My throat tightened. Is she using the same identity? Marcus shook his head. That's the other part. She's used variations. Sometimes she steals. Sometimes she invents. He tapped a line on a printed report. Her claimed employer in France? The company existed. Went out of business 3 years ago. Centive. My hands trembled. I hated that I couldn't keep them still. Marcus leaned forward. I also found communications encrypted apps, burner numbers. That suggests she's not working alone. A network? I asked. He nodded. A small one, but organized. I stared at the photos until my eyes blurred. Ethan was building a future in his head, wedding plans, holidays, a life. Juliet was building an exit strategy. What do we do? I asked. Marcus didn't smile. Timing matters. If we spook her, she disappears. And your son will spend years wondering if you ruined his happiness. I swallowed hard. So we wait? We prepare, Marcus said, and we strike at a moment she can't wriggle out of. Outside, the wind pushed dry leaves across my porch. Inside, I felt the weight of something I hadn't felt since my firehouse days. A call coming in, and no option not to respond. When her parents arrived, I knew I was about to meet actors, not family. The doorbell rang at 6 sharp the following Thursday. Juliet stood on my porch with an older couple who looked like they'd stepped off a European film set. Tailored coats, expensive perfume, smiles that landed like practiced lines. Mr. Hale, Juliet said brightly, this is my father, Elaine, and my mother, Colette. Elaine kissed my hand like he'd rehearsed it. Colette hugged me just a second too long. Ethan arrived behind them, carrying wine, and that glowing, hopeful expression. Aren't they great? He whispered to me. Dad, I feel like I'm finally getting a real family again. My heart tugged, because Ethan didn't mean mine wasn't real. He meant he missed Marlene. I smiled and welcomed them in. And then I did something on purpose. I spoke French. Not perfectly fast, just enough to test them. I'm sorry, I said in French modestly. My accent is old. It has been many years. Juliet's eyes flickered. So did Elaine's. Colette's smile tightened for half a beat. They hadn't expected me to understand. Good. At dinner, they praised my cooking in English. In French, when they thought I wasn't listening, Colette muttered that American food was bland. Elaine joked about the finish line. Juliet's voice stayed low, confident. She's harmless, she told them in French. But keep your details straight. We're almost there. Ethan laughed at something she said in English, clueless. I passed the salt and kept smiling because the game had started. The more they talked, the more their story contradicted itself. Elaine claimed he'd taught history for 30 years, yet he couldn't name a single school without fumbling. Colette said she worked in local government, but every time I asked what department, the answer shifted: tourism, housing, then community services. Their French accents were wrong, too not the regional flavor they claimed. Subtle, but noticeable if you've lived around the language. I listened the way you listen for smoke, not panicked, just alert. After dessert, Ethan helped me bring coffee into the living room. Juliet stayed behind with her parents. They spoke quickly in French, too quick for Ethan to catch, even if he'd tried. I caught enough. Christmas Eve, Juliet said. Engagement. Then New Year's wedding. It's perfect. He won't back out when it's wrapped in holiday emotion. Alan chuckled. And the father? He's a soft old man, she said. He'll sign what we need. I carried the coffee in and set the cups down carefully so my hands wouldn't betray me. Ethan leaned close. Dad, what do you think? I looked at my son, my good, hopeful son, and felt a pain that was almost physical. I think, I said slowly, you're very generous. Ethan smiled, mistaking my caution for approval. That night, after they left, I called Marcus. I need this to end, I said. Marcus paused. Then we accelerate. My voice came out steady, even though my heart was hammering. Do it, I said, because Christmas Eve was 10 days away. And Juliet believed she was on a smooth road to victory. The plan wasn't to humiliate her, it was to stop her before she could sign her name into Ethan's life. Marcus came over the next morning with a thicker folder and a timeline chart like a coach drawing plays. We have enough for an official report, he said, but we need the right delivery. What do you mean? I asked. If she knows she's being investigated, she runs, Marcus said. And your son will chase her emotionally, even if his brain knows better. I swallowed. So when? Marcus tapped the calendar. Christmas Eve, he said. Ethan will bring her here. She'll feel safe. She'll be distracted by the proposal. My stomach twisted. He's going to propose. Marcus nodded. Yes, that's the risk. But it's also the moment she's least likely to bolt. I stared at the calendar square like it was a trap door. How do we involve immigration? I asked. Marcus slid a business card across the table. Agent Dana Kim, he said. ICE. She's handled cases like this. She'll move if the evidence is solid. I picked up the card and felt the weight of what I was about to do. You understand, Marcus added. Your son may hate you at first. I exhaled slowly. I'd rather be hated than watch him get ruined, I said. Marcus nodded once. No judgment, just acknowledgement. I called Agent Kim that afternoon. Her voice was calm, professional. If what you're saying is true, she said, we can act, but we need to do it right. Tell me how, I replied. And as I hung up, I looked around my quiet house, Marlene's framed photos, Ethan's childhood baseball glove on a shelf. This wasn't revenge for my pride. This was defense. And defense is still love even when it hurts. I wrapped Christmas gifts I prayed would never be opened. On Christmas Eve, I cooked Ethan's favorites: rosemary potatoes, brisket, and a pecan pie Marlene used to make when she wanted the house to feel whole. The table looked perfect. Candlelight. My grandmother's silverware. The same decorations we'd used when Ethan was a kid. The normalcy felt like a lie. At 4:17 p.m., Ethan called. Dad, he said, voice bright and nervous. We'll be there at 6. I'm doing it tonight. I've got the ring. The ring. Marlene's ring. The one Ethan had asked for quietly a month after she passed, saying, I want to give it to the woman I marry. I want Mom to be part of it. My throat tightened. That's beautiful, son, I said. If you're hearing this, and you've ever had to smile through fear for someone you love, you know how heavy that moment is. At Cinque Quaranta, Agent Dana Kim arrived. She wore a simple blazer and carried herself like she could blend into a dinner party without becoming part of it. We wait until after the main course, she said softly. Let her relax. My hands were cold. And Ethan? Dana's eyes softened. He's going to be hurt, but you're preventing a longer hurt. Outside, Ethan's car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I saw him take Juliet's hand. She looked radiant in a red dress, confident, untouchable. I opened the front door with a steady smile, and I let her walk right into the moment she'd been building toward so she could lose it all at once. She flirted through dinner like she owned the ending. Juliet kissed my cheek. Mr. Hale, your home is so warm. Like a movie. Ethan nearly glowed, his hand brushing his jacket pocket where the ring box made a small bulge. Dana sat in the living room at first, introduced as a friend of a friend visiting for the holidays. Juliet's eyes flicked to her, assessing, then dismissed her. Professional criminals can smell law enforcement, but they can also talk themselves out of fear. Dinner started smooth. Ethan spoke about his plans for next year. Juliet asked questions that made him feel admired. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm at the right moments, kept him suspended in a perfect version of himself. I watched it happen with a strange, quiet grief. Halfway through the brisket, Dana joined us. She complimented Juliet's accent, asked casually where she'd lived before Austin. Juliet didn't miss a beat. Paris, she said. But I always dreamed of America. Dana asked about her visa status lightly, almost teasing. Juliet's smile held, but the muscles around her mouth tightened for half a second. After the main course, Juliet glanced at the clock. This has been lovely, she said. But perhaps we should leave soon. It's getting late. Ethan blinked. But we haven't had pie. And Dad got gifts. There is no rush, Juliet said quickly, too quickly. I'm just thinking of the drive. There was no weather, no storm, no reason. But something in her had started to twitch. Dana set her napkin down gently. Actually, she said, voice shifting, before anyone goes anywhere, I should introduce myself properly. Juliet's glass paused midair. Dana reached into her bag, and Ethan's whole future tilted on its edge. When Dana showed her badge, Juliet's accent vanished, like a light switching off. Agent Dana Kim, she said. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The room went silent so fast I could hear the candle wick crackle. Juliet's face didn't change much, just the eyes. The warmth drained out, replaced by calculation. Dana continued calmly. Miss Moreau, we need to discuss discrepancies in your documentation. Ethan stared. What? Discrepancies? Dana, who are you, Dad? He turned to me like I'd suddenly become a stranger. Ethan, I said softly, listen to her. Dana pulled up photos on her phone, wedding shots, courthouse exits, different names, the same face. Your fiancé is connected to multiple identity and marriage fraud cases across several states, Dana said. We have evidence of falsified records, stolen identity elements, and coordination with others. Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Juliet's voice cut through the air flat, American. This is ridiculous. Ethan flinched at the voice more than the accusation. Because the accent he loved, the thing that made her feel special, was gone. Dana stepped closer. Juliet Moreau is not your name, she said. We believe your real identity is... Juliet smiled then, cold and amused. Oh, she said. So you finally did your homework. Ethan's ring box slipped from his pocket and hit the floor with a quiet thud that sounded like a door closing. He looked down at it like it had betrayed him. Then he looked at me. Dad, he whispered, voice shaking. What is this? I wanted to reach across the table and pull him back into safety. But safety doesn't feel safe when it arrives as truth. And Juliet, no longer pretending, leaned back like she was bored. That's when I knew she wasn't just going to confess. She was going to hurt him on purpose. She didn't deny it. She enjoyed watching him break. Juliet's smile turned sharp. Oh, Ethan, she said in flat, perfect American English. Did you really think I fell for you? Ethan's throat worked like he was trying to swallow glass. Stop, please, she shrugged. You were convenient? The ring, the house, the easy paperwork. Men like you want to be heroes. I just handed you a script. Agent Kim stepped forward, cuffs ready. You're under arrest for immigration fraud and identity theft. Juliet leaned toward Ethan anyway, like she couldn't resist the final cut. I studied you, your books, your habits, your loneliness. You were the easiest mark in that cafe. The ring box slipped from Ethan's hand and hit the floor like a heartbeat stopping. Ethan didn't scream, he went quiet, and that silence punished me. He stared at the doorway after they took her, then looked at me like I'd rearranged the world while he wasn't watching. How long did you know? He asked. A few weeks, I admitted. His laugh was thin and bitter. So you let me plan this. You let me bring Mom's ring. I needed proof, I said, voice too small for the moment. If I told you first, you wouldn't believe me. That's the problem, he snapped. You decided what I could handle. He picked up the ring box carefully, like it was fragile history. I love you, Dad, he said, eyes bright with pain. But I can't be here right now. Then he left quietly, like a door closing on trust. Her last line wasn't a threat, it was collateral damage. Before the car door shut, Juliet tossed one more detail into the room like a lit match. The real Juliet exists, she'd said. I stole her life piece by piece. That night I called Marcus. Find out if she's telling the truth, I said. He didn't hesitate. It's possible. Using a real person's footprint makes the lie believable. My stomach turned. Ethan was hurt, yes, but what if an innocent woman in France was about to get questioned, frozen out of her own accounts, blamed for a stranger's crimes? Protection suddenly meant more than stopping a wedding. It meant cleaning up what my family had touched without knowing. And if you've ever been caught in someone else's mess, you know sometimes doing the right thing creates another responsibility you can't ignore. When I met the real Juliet, I understood why a thief chose her life to wear. 2 months later, I stood at Austin Bergstrom with a simple sign, Juliet Moreau. She approached cautiously, no polished charm, no performance, just tired eyes and a wary posture. Mr. Hale? She asked. Accent real, voice steady. Yes, I said, and I'm sorry. Over coffee, she explained what the stolen identity had done to her. Questions from authorities, whispers in her town, bank access disrupted. Her life hadn't exploded, it had quietly cracked. I don't understand, she said. Why me? Because your life was believable, I told her. Real enough to verify. Ordinary enough to hide in. That night, I realized revenge wasn't the ending. Repair was. And repair is harder. Ethan agreed to meet her only because he needed reality to overwrite the lie. He texted me after weeks of silence. 1 hour, public place. We chose the same coffee shop downtown. He arrived looking older, like trust had weight. The real Juliet stood and simply said, Hello, Ethan. I'm sorry for what happened to you. No flirting, no perfect lines, just honesty. They talked for nearly 2 hours. I stayed outside, hands on my steering wheel, refusing to hover. When Ethan finally walked out, his shoulders were still tense, but not collapsed. Later, he pulled me aside at my house. She's real, he whispered. That's the difference. The other one always said what I wanted. He met my eyes. You were right to stop it, Dad. You were wrong to keep me blind. I nodded. I know. The ending didn't feel like winning. It felt like learning how to be a father again. The first time Ethan came back for dinner after Christmas Eve, he didn't mention Juliet at all. He just sat at the table, rolled his sleeves up, and asked if I needed help carving the roast. It was ordinary. And somehow, that felt like progress. He kept his mother's ring, but he stopped carrying it in his pocket, like a question waiting for an answer. He started therapy. He took long walks without his phone. He reconnected with friends he'd drifted from while he was busy building a future that never existed. One night, months later, he sat across from me and said, I might visit France, not to fall in love, just to see what's real. I didn't tell him what to do. I didn't warn him. I didn't investigate. I listened. We'll be okay, he said carefully, but only if we're honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I promise, I told him, and I meant it not as a strategy, not as damage control, but as a father who finally understood that protection without trust feels like control. If you've ever had to choose between shielding someone you love and trusting them to face the truth, I'd genuinely like to know what would you have done in my place. And if stories like this resonate with you, consider subscribing and sharing. Sometimes the quietest lessons stay with us the longest.